So hey everybody, my name is Michael Bailey. I work with the Snoqualmie Indian tribe. I have been on the restoration team for about 7 years with them, a little over 7 years. Uh, we have a pretty small restoration team. We don't have a lot of uh, the nice maps or like analysis that a lot of y'all are impressively doing. Um, but I think we still do a lot of good work, and I'm hoping that my pretty pictures will make up for what I lack in analysis. Um, So just a little background. Snoqualmie tribe is just about half an hour east of Seattle. We work in the Snohomish Basin, Raya 7, and our team mostly focuses in the upper and lower Snoqualmie Valley, uh, basically from Mount Si to about Snohomish, the King County border, and then west to Lake Sammamish, where we work on some kokanee projects. Less knotweed on those smaller streams. So most of what I'm going to be talking about is in these large river systems in the Snoqualmie Valley, above and below the falls. Um, the Environmental and Natural Resource Department, ENR, I'll probably say ENR a lot. We're the department of the Snoqualmie tribe that hosts the restoration team that does all the knotweed treatment, our water quality program, our wildlife team, GIS, some environmental advocacy stuff, all those sorts of like natural cultural resource based jobs. And this is a map that I'm really excited about. We just finished working on this with our GIS team, just showing sort of some of the region that we're in. This isn't the greatest like form to show this map. I realize that maybe people on Zoom may not be able to see the details on here. It's meant to be like a 2x3 big map, just showing sort of some of the context that the Snoqualmie tribe is working in. Where we start up here in like the Snoqualmie North Bend area, have all sorts of water quality projects and noxious weed projects, and then going down, working down the Snoqualmie River on all sorts of salmon restoration projects. I also just wanted to point out a couple of things that I really like about this map that talk about some of the reasons that we work in these places. Um, each of these symbols represents a different reason that we're doing restoration projects in the valley. The Snoqualmie tribe has this ancestral land connection from the Sound up through the Cascades. We've got like our little the original proposed reservation that's on the map. The Snoqualmie tribe had 16, I think, signatories on the Treaty of Point Elliott, but that the reservation was never delivered, which included this reservation on the Tolt River, and then a different reservation that was on the Kitsap Peninsula. So just showing sort of where that land connection, that like land base was for the Snoqualmie tribe and how it relates to where the projects that we're doing are. Many of these projects are fish related, are salmon related. And so a lot of the knotweed that we're doing is like on that main stem, as well as the Tolt River and some of the smaller tributaries up in the valley. But we also have projects here in the upper watershed where we're doing more like Camas Prairie restoration, and those are also like floodplain wet prairies. So figuring out how to deal with knotweed in like an open field as well as on a riverbank that's eroding to restore access to these cultural resources. I just want to kind of set like a pedestal to like build the rest of the talk on and share this map that I'm really excited about. So we're also working on all these projects are done in partnership. We have a couple of projects on the tribe's reservation, which is this little red box right here. It's about 40 acres. But a lot of our other projects are in partnership with King County, with private landowners, and with cities and other like local jurisdictions. So if you can travel in your mind back to Justin Brooks's talks and think about those beautiful knotweed pictures on the Snoqualmie and other rivers, I'm sure. That's sort of where we're working for this talk. Great. So like I said, our team is pretty small. I'm going to try to take a different path because we don't have a lot of great like knotweed analysis. We're doing a lot of the same things y'all are doing. with a pretty traditional like spraying imazapyr and glyphosate, coming back to the same sites year after year, trying to get these projects taken care of. But one of the things that I have been really happy with in the last couple of years, we started um, trying to take more of a holistic and trying to incorporate a lot of other treatment methods into our noxious weed program. So I wanted to include this picture, and I'll like come back to this as I go through the talk, of some of these like post spray sites where we've planted like your usual palette of potted plants. But then we've been overseeding with a diverse set of native grasses and perennials and annuals and all sorts of like forbs, trying to quickly fill in that space and create more competition for both recolonization of knotweed and blackberry thistle, trying to interrupt that like cartwheel of weeds that comes through after you do those big knotweed projects. And so I have a list of what you're like the plants you're looking at here, but a lot of this is like lupin and a bunch of different native brooms, and little oats and Clarkia, things like that. And I really like that it takes up all the space and it looks really good, and I'll talk more about that later. Um, I also want to talk about the land that we are working on in the Snoqualmie Valley is incredibly it's been changed since that like pre-contact or like the Treaty Point Elliott era, has been radically changed, and like created all this space for knotweed to come in. I know this is probably isn't new information, but the Snoqualmie Valley is, I think, in comparison to some of these other regions that we're working on, is extremely developed and like by the local cities, by agriculture, by all sorts of different land uses. And so a lot of our knotweed is like mixed in with all these different like permissions and landowner issues. And so that this like larger sort of like not just the chemical, but the mechanical and the cultural approach of how we treat these weeds is becoming very important to our program. We also choose the sites that we're working on based on just opportunity to work in different places, how we have permission. This like interacts a lot with that top-down approach where we are working with King County and they have a great, massive knotweed control program that does a lot of that headwaters to downstream. A lot of our knotweed control is more based on like where we have access and who is letting us spray where in combination with like the partners that we're working with. So just to get some of these like very basic out of the way, as I was saying, we do a lot of physical and chemical removal, not so much physical for knotweed, but the cultural removal, as well as like the cultural prevention part of our programs has become really important. Seeding those plants, getting volunteers involved, trying to get more community awareness and input in these projects. A lot of the large projects that were done by some of our partners have become volunteer sites or like restoration sites that we are inviting a lot of volunteers to, so they can see the change, showing them pictures of what those sites used to look like. And hope was a big part of the last talk, and giving those communities hope that they can see their local ecosystems change and they can see these like cultural resources, natural resources rebuilding in their local landscapes is a big part of how we like motivate our neighborhoods and then like have more access to funding based on what like I'm going to put in quotes movement that we're building around those ecological sites. So I just wanted to touch on that. Our team goes in, we remove the weeds as the first step, and then like all these other prevention and removal methods come in after that. To get back to the way the Snoqualmie Valley looks, this is just a shot from King County IMAPs of the lower Snoqualmie Valley, where you have the forest uplands on both sides of the valley, and then agriculture right in the middle, and then these buffers. I couldn't find a great picture that showed like what it looks like right at the bank. But you can see like these the buffers were just like you have this minimal, either forested or not forested, sort of neglected right on the edge, where the river has a lot of space to move, but it's bordered by these like really um, like intense big or like hillsides of knotweed, especially in the lower valley. Um, and for us, this is also really important. The Snoqualmie tribe takes part in canoe journey every year. And this is like a big gathering place where tribal members and canoe family can come together. And we take the canoe from Fall City all the way down the river. That's from below the falls. So we're just mostly in the lower valley. And it's really different when I mean, a lot of you have talked about treatment on the river, but when you get um, like the community on the river and they see the riverbanks from like the river's point of view, seeing how dominant those knotweed and blackberry stands are, and trying to like uh, have these conversations with the tribal members in public. Um, about the restoration work we're doing and how we're changing these riverbanks and like how we want to treat the water and how different it can look when we have access to like a restoration site versus going through a lot of the agricultural land where we're still working on access or like in the first couple of years of treatment. I feel like gives a really different perspective on like how much progress we're making and how people think about these restoration sites of the valley or the water's health. So I don't like this isn't extremely unique, but just to describe like sort of the environment that we're working on in the lower Snoqualmie. Um, Again, like reaching back to that like community input and community outreach, trying to gather support and show some of the work that we're doing. Um, I wanted to highlight a couple of other projects that we've been doing, more just surveying work. Like a lot of you said, using Survey 123, using quick capture to mark where trees and where infestations are of certain noxious weeds. We, every 5 years, are doing a survey of all tribally held lands, making marks of where, like holly and knotweed and blackberry, where all these noxious weeds are, and then coming back in the following years and treating them. This is a big project for a pretty small team, but having these like JS programs really helps a lot. Just trying to take care of like a pretty large land base with a pretty small team. I also wanted to highlight some restoration on Old McDonald. This was another one where we had some like old restoration, some knotweed, some blackberry on the channel or on the banks. We're able to spray a lot of that right on the side, working with a lot of partners. This is a project that's been in the works for a long time. Like a lot of you are also saying, this knotweed moves through floods. It gets like moved around very quickly. Here's a picture of a pretty minor flood, but all of this like purple in the square is blackberry that was on the site and really interacts with the floodplain with the water that's moving through that site. Like when there's big water, we had a really big flood in December of last year. So curious how that's going to move things around. But just, to give some hope, here's the site. Where's my numbers? Interesting. So here's the site back when we started, about 2017, 2018. And just, I don't know, to show like the progress of this work. Here it is again, about 6 years later. This was a site that we didn't do any seeding at, but had that emptiness when we were done spraying. Here's a site where we had like a field of noxious weeds. We treated it. This is Fall City Natural Area. We had two control groups, like one plot we did not seed, and then there was a plot next to it that we did seed, with all sorts of native, annual and perennial grasses, forbs, all that stuff. So this is right after we sprayed. had done an initial planting. You can see some of like the little Sitka spruces sticking up in there. An old stump with a bunch of hops on it from when this place used to be a hop farm about 100 years ago. And then the next year, uh, with no seeds, still seeing like a lot of that emptiness, a lot of space between the plants, and then some like recolonization by the noxious weeds that were there, with a seed bank that had built up from like the blackberry and the hops and clematis and all that that was still there. Uh, Here's the plot right next to it. There was some space between them, so they weren't like just side by side. January 22, pretty empty space. We filled, this is one of our like trial runs where we seeded this area with the prairie mix from Northwest Meadowscapes, uh, which they like list out the like composition of seeds on their website. And then sorry, just for dramatic effect. Here's the not seeded site the following year. And then from here, we did seed and it like just filled up so much space. We saw so much less like reinfestation of the plants that were there. Um, Still seeing like some thistle and some reed canary grass coming in, but for the most part, like just introducing much more of that competition was able to give us like a heads up and like just free up a lot of our time so we could focus on the sites that really needed continuous treatment. And I feel like this was a big game changer for our restoration team, um, where a lot of these plants like don't come back. A lot of the annual plants like rely on that initial year of disturbance and then like may not come back uh, after that. Like they reseed, but it depends on like how much competition there is between places. Um, but just amazing to see like, and I wish I had like a graph to show you after this, like how our um like the herbicide we used fell off. But I'm just thrilled with how this site looks and how it has like continued to evolve. Here it is the next year, where the yarrow and some of the native grasses have like really started to take over. And I think there's some like uh, biennial river lupin that was also like very present in here. And at this point, it's like starting to create competition for the plants that we planted, which is also kind of exciting to me. But I don't know. So I wanted to shout this out, but also just I know this isn't going to work for every site where like we're redoing imazapyr or glyphosate every year, where like that might kill seeds, but a lot of these seeds too like are waiting. They like don't come up in the same site, or they don't come up across different sites in the same year, but come up in different years. They're like waiting on some environmental signal. So uh, that we don't know what it is, just like some years certain plants come up. Um, I think just having them there helps a lot. And I'm happy to take questions about like where we've been getting seeds and other questions about like what we're seeing. And then just real quick to wrap up, we did some seed studies. I don't have a lot of graphs, but we at those same sites would bring this like meter by meter plot out and just kind of like toss it into the seeded areas, and take data on plant diversity. So like listing every plant that's there as well as listing like how much space each plant is taking up. Um, and we found that the seeded areas had more diversity than the non-seeded areas. There was still weeds present in the areas where we like overseeded, but they took up less space and were like stretching out a lot more. They were like a little more stressed than like the non-seeded areas where they're like growing nice and full. So that's the data I have, as well as this pretty picture of some of the plants that we put in. And a lot of these are from a prairie project, not the exact same one, but I will stop there and go to questions. Here's some information. If you want to volunteer with us, it looks like there was a little bit of a translation error in the PowerPoints that we're using, but we've got volunteers and a volunteer email list and just like other announcements that I'll go out. So yeah, check out our website for more.